All right, so I got tired of webinar 13 and different versions, so I decided if I were president in 2020. So one of the things that just I guess right out of the box from a disclosure perspective, these are totally my opinions. Obviously, I'm the president of Vance Wealth, so from I guess a values perspective, this is where I definitely stand. But it's really just my opinions. I'm trying to back it up with facts and some interesting ideas. So I hope you do enjoy. And what we're going to cover today is kind of things that I would fix. Now, this is a short list of, I think, things that we could tackle. If you guys have interest in this, I might try to delve deeper into other topics. If you have other topics that you think, are challenges for our nation, challenges for our economy, I'm willing to dig deeper. It's really difficult to go into this level of conversation because it might be safer in a Zoom format for me because from the political perspective, things can get pretty heated. And so you all know me, I try to be pretty fair with stuff. I try to take more of a pragmatic approach. So I'm going to attempt to do that today. Just, I guess, in full disclosure, I'm registered as an independent. As a core of my philosophy, I tend to be a big believer of limited government, though, and putting more liberty on individuals, more power to people, and less on the government. So that's just where I start with. But I'm very independent-minded. I have some things in here that are definitely, more in the middle, some things that are more right, some things that are more left. And so what I try to do is take a pragmatic approach on how can we fix some real issues that, in my opinion, clearly politicians don't really want to do it. And I think it's maybe because they don't. It maybe has less to do with the fact that they don't. It's more the landscape we're in, the environment we're in just is not allowing for it, which is a shame. So hopefully we'll be able to make some progress with this. And this is just my attempt to hopefully be somewhat of a thought leader and give you some pragmatic solutions. Now, I started this off saying I tend to be from a thought process of limited government. And what you're going to see in some of my solutions that unfortunately it's actually, there's going to be some government involvement because we're pretty far down this path. It's been, almost 100 years in the making, kind of going back to the Great Depression. And so there's a lot of things that just can't be undone, but hopefully some pragmatic ways to make some real change and to start the healing process, start to fix the process of fixing some of these. So some of these are, I guess the first two are very tangible and I have some real specific ways. The last two, a little bit more open conversation. Frankly, the last one, number 4 on tax fairness, we could probably spend a whole hour. I'd much rather do that in a debate format or a live Q&A. So what we're going to go through is Social Security system, talk about what's going on with it, some basic facts. We're going to go into student loan crisis and a fix. I don't want to say it's an easy fix. None of this is easy. You see my disclaimer at the bottom. This is designed to be a high-level, thought-provoking analysis. Lots of details. I mean, when you start thinking about the size of our economy, trillions of dollars at stake in these different areas, there's no simple solution. And, trying to convey some thoughts that I'm going to cover today, you clearly have to keep things fairly simple to the point, or you just get lost in the weeds and it doesn't make any impact. So, but I'm hopeful this will start. I'm going to share it with our new local congressman, Mike Garcia. Hopefully, these can be some ideas he can maybe champion with his time in Washington. So these are the 4 items. And again, we're going to take a break at each one. So if you have Q&A as we're going through there, and I would just, out of respect for everybody on here, I would like to try to keep it as apolitical as possible. But it's okay to disagree with me. If you have stuff you want to push back on, I'm all for that, but let's play nice. And let's have a nice dialogue. I do have the control, so I guess I can screen if I need to, but I like this to be a really a nice, educational content or a webinar for you guys today. So, all right. So some of the things that I'm going to go through, and we can share the slideshow with you. We're also probably going to chop this into some different shorter videos, but let's just look at where Social Security system is. So in 2020, about 65 million Americans will receive over $1 trillion of Social Security benefits. And here's just some of the facts. In 1940, life expectancy of a 65-year-old was almost 14 years. Today, it's over 20 years. So what does that mean? There's a bigger strain on the system because we're living longer. Those numbers even get a little bit more interesting when you looked at the average lifespan for a man around 1935 was around 65. And so, but by the time you get there, then you survive wars, you survive dying young, all of these factors. Then you have your normal life expectancy at 65 was about 14 years for men and women combined. So By 2035, the number of Americans 65 and older will increase from approximately 56 million today to over 78 million. So that's one of the big challenges, right? We're going to have a lot more people in the system. Fortunately, we do have a big millennial generation behind them that'll be paying into the system, and hopefully we'll have a good immigration policy to be able to allow more people to come in and have more workers in our system, which will help to offset some of this Social Security challenges. That's a topic for another day. And here's one of the big challenges. There are currently 2.8 workers for each Social Security beneficiary. By 2035, there will be 2.3 covered workers, right? So again, this is the challenge, is you don't have enough people paying into the system based on the number of people that it's covering. And that's one of the benefits of our society, is we have longevity. We're living longer. Retirement ages haven't been pushed back that much. We're living longer, so it's putting a bigger strain on the system. So, how do we go about making some changes? Apologize, this is a little bit blurry. So just so that in case you're not aware of this, let me get my little pointer here. The way that they determine how much you're going to pay in Social Security, it's based on your wage base, which is up to $137,700. And so what that means is on $1 that you earn through wages, through W-2 wages or sole proprietor income, up to $137,700, you pay at a rate of 6.2% that goes into Social Security. 6.2% is what you as the employee pay. Your employer matches that. So the total amount that goes in is 12.4. Now, so all the way up to 137. Now, once you're above 137,000, then you're not taxed anymore. You basically paid all of that you need to pay. And the reason why they cap it is because the benefits are capped, right? So if you had a wage base of 300,000 and you had to pay tax on that full amount, you're not getting any benefit out of the system. So they cap it so that it feels a little bit more like a pension, right? You pay in and you receive a benefit at some future time. So that is the rate. And we'll come back to this. Try to remember this 12.4% rate, because that's going to factor into some of the tax fairness conversations that I want to have. But that's essentially what this looks like, okay? And there's other items on here we're not going to cover today, but that's what this looks like for 2020. And if you look at, there's a couple things on here. So I'm going to read just this top paragraph. Over time, Social Security taxes have become a major share of federal revenues. When the tax was first collected in 1937, the combined payroll tax was 2%. It raised $580 million, which is about $10 billion in today's dollars. And in 2019, the total amount collected was $914 billion, and it represented 26% of the total federal tax receipts. So think of that. It's has such a big part of the federal tax revenue that's coming in is going into, is being collected for Social Security benefits. And so pretty massive. So this started as a small insurance type of a policy, and now it's obviously a pension that most retirees rely on. I should say all retirees rely on. So the amount that came in, again, was about $914 billion. You can see the amount that's coming in for Medicare. Now we can talk about other issues on like there's tons more complicated ways to fix Social Security, to fix Medicare. I just have a real simple solution, because complicated in Washington doesn't seem like it's going to work. So let's be real about it. So if we actually look where we are today, we've talked about that there's this trust fund. There is the Social Security Trust Fund, which has almost $3 trillion in it. But this is what's happening right now. We have about $1 trillion coming in and about $1 trillion coming out. So for basically the first time in anyone's lifetime, or since it's existed, we have about the same amount coming in as that's going out. And that's the challenge that the government knows is on the horizon, is that what happens when we have more going out than is coming in, right? That's the concern. And so let's talk about this. And so when we talk about, this idea that it's not fair for most Americans, well, what does that mean? What do I mean by that statement? Well, if you pay into it for your entire life, you have that 12% paid into it, from your part and your employer, and you die young or you die early in retirement, there is a chance for a survivor benefit, but in many cases, there's no money left. All that money that got put in there, there's no money for your kids. There are some payouts potentially for your survivor, depending on how old you are, how old your kids are, but it's a very, very limited from a death benefit perspective. So, those that don't have long life expectancy are adversely impacted by this, and this actually hurts lower and middle class families a lot more because they do have a shorter life expectancy. And the whole idea is that if we could invest this money, it would create substantially more wealth. Now, there is a big debate with, I guess, coming probably from the Republican Party, like we should privatize that. Now, I think in theory, there's some merit there. I honestly, from a pragmatic perspective, I think we're probably too far. But why don't we approach this like a pension? Why don't we approach this like CalPERS does, or major pensions? They invest their money. They're not sitting in cash. And I'll go through that in a second. But let me just show you the impact. So what I did is I built a calculator using Excel. I went onto the Social Security website, used their calculator. So here's what I did. I said, if you start at age 22 and you have a full retirement age of 67, which is basically what it is, and you have a beginning salary of $40,000, and you have 4% inflation of your wages, which means over each year, your wages will grow by 4%, which is a combination of inflation and a combination of you just getting better at your job, right? And your benefits get paid at age 67. So I did this math, and because of the impact of inflation, you know, going from age 22 to 67 is 45 years. That's a long time. So the benefit estimates based on Social Security is $7,362 per month. That's what someone will get for the remainder of their life plus inflation. I then did an investment and said, what if you just invested the money for this person, or you got to invest your own money at a 6% growth rate, a 7% growth rate, or an 8% growth rate? Obviously, these are hypothetical, but 6, 7, and 8 using 5% income that comes out. Look at the amount of money that actually would come out. So in a 6% growth rate, you'd receive about $8,200 a year, or sorry, $8,200 a month. At a 7% growth rate, it would be about $10,000 a month. And at a 8% growth rate, it would be about $14,000 a month. I believe CalPERS uses a 7% rate of return on their current investment assumptions. And so let's just say we can invest it like CalPERS. 7% growth, that's $10,695. That is almost 50% more income by having more of an investment approach. Right now, this money is invested in part in government bonds. And if anyone's been paying attention, the rates of government bonds are now at all-time lows. The 10-year government bond is paying below 1%, and the 30-year U.S. government bond is paying below 1.5%. So Social Security is actually going to earn lower and lower rates of return. And here's the big, I think, sting for the fact that people put all their hard-earned money in for 45 years. Look at the hypothetical account value. So let's say you died at 65, you died at 67. This would be money you could pass on to the next generation. Now, this is kind of in my ideal scenario, the fact that, all right, let me just do an apples to apples comparison. What would a benefit be if you could take control of your money and actually invest it? Now, we all know that a lot of people don't have the right habits to put things in place. They don't have the right investment discipline. So I'm not suggesting this is a perfect solution. I just wanted to do the math to see, like, how far are we off? And this was pretty staggering at higher growth rates, how much money basically the Social Security system is stealing from the average American because they're not getting good returns on their money, right? And there's obviously pieces of the Social Security system that are built in to help those less fortunate. So we have to account for that. But again, this is just the numbers that I did. So I do want to go into like, what should the solutions be? So my note here that I already kind of addressed a little bit was looking at the fact that while I believe privatization would be an effective option, it's not realistic. So what's the next best option? So invest a Social Security trust fund like a pension rather than in government bonds. The average return on the Social Security Trust Fund was 2.2%, and the trust fund balance at the end of last year was 2.9 trillion. So if we could invest like a pension and earn a potential 7% versus 2%, that's 5% more per year, roughly. And I guess, yeah, right around 5% per year on $3 trillion, that's $150 billion of excess. So right now, that would actually allow us to continue to build. And then simple things. Current full retirement age is at 67. Social Security has been in existence for roughly 80 years. Full retirement has moved from 65 to 67, 2 years. Life expectancies have expanded well beyond 6, 7, 8 years. So we have to move full retirement age back. Now, those of you who are close to retirement or in retirement, that's not fair to do to you. So start tackling the next generation. If you were born in the 60s, 68. You're born in the 70s, 69. And if you were born in the 80s, age 70 retirement. We have longer life expectancy, so we should be willing to work longer, and we have to be less dependent on Social Security as the major source of our retirement benefit. And then move it back 1 year for each decade. Now, if you get into the weeds, and this is where like this is a very pragmatic, simple approach, they might have to tweak this a little bit, a year here, a year there. But let's also not call this an entitlement program. I'm sure for many of you, if you're collecting Social Security, you don't feel like this is an entitlement, like a welfare. It's not an entitlement. You paid into it. So I don't know if it's going to fly to rename it a public pension, but you know, let's call it what it is. So that's kind of a high level. That would make a massive move towards fixing Social Security. It would be something that would be off our plate. Again, the devils are in the details a little bit. You could adjust that. But that's the high level solution, is let's treat this more like a public entity, a private institution would, and not how our government is focusing. And if you look at we're at 2.2%, that number in 2020 is going to come down. It's probably going to be in the 1.5% range. So it's only getting worse because of the low interest rate environment that we're in. Okay. Any questions? So that's our Social Security piece. That took about 20 minutes. I'm going to come in here and see if we have any Q&A. All right, no open questions. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next topic. If you ask a question that is Social Security related, I'm totally fine with it. I'll come back to it. I'm not going to check in though until I get to the next topic. So that's number one. Now we're going to go into the student loan crisis. This is obviously a big political hot button, and hopefully what I say is not unpopular, but it's kind of how I feel about things. And what I'd like to do is move on. So here's just some of the facts. Now, this came from the Federal Reserve and the New York Federal Reserve. This was as of third quarter of last year. But total student loan debt was 1.5 trillion, about 45 million borrowers. The average student loan debt about 32,000. Average student loan payment about $393. So, and one of the staggering things we're seeing here is more than 1.2 borrowers went into default in 2019, a 14% increase. So clearly we know the debt is high. It's becoming very problematic for people to pay it back because these are staggering numbers. And, you know, while you take the average, that includes somebody who might only have a $5,000 balance or even a $1,000 balance, but there's plenty of people that have balances in excess of 100,000. So now remember, at the end of the day, those were choices by individuals to take out those loans, right? You know, here in Santa Clarita, we have an amazing community college system that, you know, you can get your first 2 years really inexpensive. And so there are options. So we have to remember that student loans are the choice of the individual. Now, depending on their academics, depending on what they go into, that's going to drive the cost, whether they're going to a private institution, public institution. So there's still tremendous amount of choice. The challenge becomes the debt burden is becoming unbearable as we go into the workforce, and it's going to be a big headwind for millennials and the next generation to be able to, you know, buy a home and kind of live the American dream. So there is something that we should be how we should be tackling it. And you know, honestly, the student loan crisis became a much bigger issue when essentially the government started to make loans a lot cheaper for everybody, meaning low interest rates, and then that caused tuition payments to go up tremendously. Now, we can have a debate around there, but one of the things that's really fascinating to me is that people are kind of mad at the government, like student loans are a problem. Nobody's going after the universities, or I'm not hearing people go after the universities. People aren't going after the teachers and the administrators and saying, well, hey, how do we get costs down? That doesn't seem to be a focus. The focus is kind of like, well, why do we have to pay this back? And so I hope this doesn't make anybody angry. This is kind of in my humble opinion. You can't make college free, but we can lower costs. And for many people, especially those, if you're in a single family home and, or single parent home, a single parent home, and the parent makes less than 50,000, for all intents and purposes, you can go to college for free. The programs are in place based on filling out student loan applications. So for what we would deem as our lower or lower middle income, the opportunities are there. The challenge becomes for the vast middle class, that it's not free for them. But I don't believe we can make it free. And the big driver of that is if we make it free, I feel like when things are free, you don't value them. And how bad would it be is if you had a college campus inundated with more students who weren't really committed, but it was free, and they just said, you know what, let's go. And then all of a sudden you have, 10% drop out. And now those 10%, there could have been other kids that go there. So one of the challenges with free, in my opinion, is that people don't value what they don't pay something for. I'm a big proponent of, as people go out into the workforce, you have loan forgiveness and things, once they get out into the system, because obviously we want an educated population. We want an educated workforce. That's how we move forward as an economy. When I've done previous webinars and we talk about technology advancements, healthcare advancements, all of these things that are making our nation amazing, we have to have an educated workforce. So education is clearly important, but how do we go about it a little bit more effectively? This next topic, and again, I know this is a hot topic on the political lines. You can't forgive student loan debt. I'm a big proponent. You can't do it, because what about all the people who paid? Are we going to go back in the history of time and just pay all those people back? Either it's fair or it's unfair. So if you believe it's fair to pay all of people's student loan, then we need to go back and literally pay back everybody who's ever paid for college education. And that's insane. We're not going to do that. And then what about the people who actually chose not to go to college? They didn't get the higher education. They chose maybe a more vocational job. They chose to go to work right out of high school. And now through higher taxes, because remember, the way we pay for stuff, it's not like we just make up money. Now, I know we do like to print money as a nation, but we just don't make it up. So when we're talking about the government paying for it, what is that? That's taxpayers. And so, when you look at this note here, so you're telling me that people who chose not to go, that didn't rack up debt, that went into the workforce, maybe their income is going to be permanently lowered because they didn't go to college. Maybe not, but maybe. And you're saying now they have to actually pay for other people who went to college. I just think there's a huge unfairness level with that. I'm not a big proponent of that. I think there are things we need to do to solve it, and I have some ideas. The last point on here, you can't allow people to file bankruptcy on student loans. If they can, too many people will be incentivized to do this, making college loans harder to come by. So let me give you a quick example. I go to an expensive school. There's plenty of schools out there right now that are $70,000 a year. After 4 years, I rack up, let's say, $280,000 to $300,000. I'm about to go into the workforce and get a job, and I'm going to make $50,000 a year. How am I going to pay back $300,000? If I make $50,000, $75,000, how am I going to pay it back? I probably can't. So what do? I decide, you know what? I'm going to file bankruptcy. I'm going to maybe do nothing for a year or 2 or 3. And, that's actually better if I just file bankruptcy, have all my $300,000 totally forgiven, wiped clean, and I can go start working and have a clean slate. That system just doesn't work. We have to keep that penalty in place. So I'm not a big fan of that. I think it creates a lot of unintended consequences. So clearly we're in a mess. How do we fix it? How do we move forward? Because it's not okay just to keep this perpetuating, because it's not good for our nation to have this level of indebtedness on student loans. So here's kind of my maybe too simple approach, but here's what it is. Step 1. Our government issues $1.5 trillion in 30-year treasury bonds at 1.46%. That was the current rate as of a few days ago. So that's what we issue. We issue that, and we can issue that. The Federal Reserve can buy them, China can buy them, whoever will buy them. We can sell those bonds, no problem. So we issue that. We then go refinance all of the student debt out there. Now, I've had some pushback before. They say, well, what about the banks that engage in this? Won't this hurt them? And the short answer is yes, but I'm talking about a systemic problem that I'm trying to get fixed. We go refinance all of the debt at 2.5%. So over 29 years. So my strategy is we go borrow at 1.5, we refinance at 2.5. We delay payments for 1 year. So that means through this COVID-19, we can get through this, delay payments. And so here's kind of what this looks like for the U.S. government. And again, this is where it makes me cringe a little bit to talk about it, because I'm a limited government type of a person, but we've gotten into this mess. How do we get out of it? And we can only do it, I think, with the magnitude of the government. And I think we do it with a for-profit motive, or at least a break-even motive, versus a losing proposition. The U.S. government earns a 1% spread, right? Because if we borrow at 1.5 and we refinance at 2.5, that's 1%. That's $15 billion annually. That's to basically administer this, or to maybe deal with people who die and who don't pay their debt off. So we have kind of a cushion here. Students have no payments for 1 year. Based on the math that I did, and this can be fact checked and it may not be 100% accurate, but based on the math that I did, which I believe to be extremely reliable, the average monthly payment would decline from $393 to $135. Now, yes, it's being amortized and spread out over 30 years, but think about this. Somebody comes out of school today and makes a decent wage to start, $40,000, $50,000. They're paying $135 a month. That's minuscule relative to their budget. Fast forward 20 years from now, they still have time left on their student loan payment. they're probably making more than 40. Maybe they're making 80, right? Do you think somebody could double their income over 20 years? Probably. So now they're making 80. What's their student loan payment? It's still 135. It's locked in. So they get to pay off future debt with inflated higher wages. So this becomes very palatable for them. The government doesn't lose anything because they've issued these bonds. There's also a massive economic stimulus. The annual payments decline from approximately basically 210 billion to 70 billion. That means $140 billion annually would be unleashed in the economy that could be spent by young people, by those with debt, because they would not have to service their loans. So again, very high level, hopefully a pragmatic solution, but there are things we can do to take dramatic action. And again, there are unintended consequences. So when you get into the details, we have to iron those out, but this seems like a good way, a good place to start. All right, I got a question. So, but what about programs like the GI Bill? Those GIs basically got college for free. There was some abuse, but it really moved that segment of population forward. So that's a great question. So I'm a big proponent of, if you, part of how you make college free is a service requirement. You know, there are countries like Australia that require you're in service for 1 year before you go to work or go to college, excuse me. So if we want to have a GI Bill, which is obviously more military focused, if we want to actually have something in place that's more community focused or some service based, and that's where you get some relief, I'm all for that. But we have to have some level of incentive. We can't just make it free, because we've already here now, many of you, if you have kids that have gone through college over the last year, you have a lot of people that couldn't get classes. I mean, think of the insanity of that. Prices are at all-time high and demands have continued to follow, and we cannot get kids out in a timely manner. That doesn't make any sense to me. All right, I got some more questions. So I do agree that you're okay. I do agree that your fix is brilliant. So but I think that there should be, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do to encourage, whether it's military service or community service or something that helps to promote society, then for sure we can do that. I also feel like education needs to be more directed towards the jobs we need. You know what, if someone wants to pursue a much harder technical job, then you should give them maybe some forgivable loans. If they're going into a degree that literally I could learn on YouTube or learn going on to Stanford Online for free, why does that make sense for us to invest $40,000 a year, $50,000 a year, $60,000 a year? So we have to just look at it a little bit differently. The problem is the universities and the teachers, there's universities mainly, not the teachers, but the universities are so ingrained, they don't want this change because it disrupts their whole model. But with what a lot of kids maybe not going back in the fall, it's going to start this conversation, because how are you going to charge full boat if my kids are learning through Zoom? You're not going to pay that same amount. You're just going to like, go get your stuff at COC for $1,000 or for free. So it's going to be different. All right. So let me see. All right, those are done. Okay, I got another one here. How could you involve the colleges in the cost reduction? They should pay part of this. So I actually am a big believer of that. Now this gets a little bit tricky. So let me see if I can do this justice by answering this. So I think that how you get the college involved with this is that, you know, you obviously incentivize, or you deal with admission based on what the community is demanding in terms of employers, right? So you're like, employers we have a lot of immigrants that come into our country for high level technical jobs because we don't have enough Americans to fill those jobs. So if you got colleges and universities more focused on how to say, okay, what jobs do we need to fill? And then what we want to do is throw more scholarship, more money, more aid at those people, meaning forgivable loans if they come in to study a certain profession. That's where colleges could be more helpful. The other part of it, and this is a trickier one, is where you have clawbacks, where you basically say, hey, if somebody, and I know there's certain student loan required payments where it's like a certain percentage of your income, where you basically look back and you say, you know what, if someone still has student debt after 15 years, kind of on a go forward basis, you're going to claw back and you're going to actually have to own part of that. So you're going to need to be more selective on, if you're going to give someone a degree in this and charge them $300,000, are they going to be able to pay this back? Now that's fraught with challenges, right? Because that might aid a higher earning family more so than a lower earning family. So it's very tricky when you start getting into the weeds, but I do think there needs to be some clawback at the education level. But I have a different solution that is kind of out of the box. It's not a financial, it's more like just disruptive of the education system. And that's one of my next big ones. So thanks for that question, Wally. That was a good one. So, all right. So All right, thanks, Wally and Tracy, for your good question. So let's go on to, we already did a question. So let me see if we have any more. We are good. Okay, so how are we doing on time? We're moving through. Okay, so the next topic is education system. These two are going to probably move through pretty quickly. Honestly, like these are the fun things that we've been having conversations with the kids and having, just conversations at the kitchen table. And we have 4 in high school right now. And so it's pretty lively conversation, and it's interesting, obviously, being in school or at home doing school, and the impact on what they're learning, their impact on how they view education. It's been a pretty fascinating, test case. And I think that hopefully coming out of this, we'll have disruption. You guys have heard me from the get-go when this all started, that this was going to accelerate disruption. We already know technology innovations, medical innovations were coming. This is going to accelerate the disruption out of a necessity. So hopefully this will make itself to the education system because it's badly needed. Education is one of the few areas where information has become free, meaning the access to information that our kids have through YouTube, through all of these sources, through Stanford Online, through all these free online resources that are, good, high quality educational content. YouTube, not always, but certainly a lot of the major universities. And college keeps getting more expensive. How does that work, right? Every other technological advancement, as you have technology improvement, and that drives the cost down, but costs keep going up. It does not make sense. Okay, so a couple quick things. So with the COVID-19, the student loan debt, just so that you're aware of, under the CARES Act, federal student loan payments are paused until October. I don't know if that's October 1st or the end of October. They'll probably will adjust that as well. I wouldn't be surprised if that's an area they push back even more. So here is, Wally, this might answer your question. So kind of, beyond a high school education. So the next phase for colleges and the university system. So here's the thing that blows my mind. How did it get so expensive, and why is anger being directed at the government and not at the universities, right? Because they're the ones driving the costs up. And so what's happening? And I know the states have a big part of funding universities, and, like the UC system and the Cal State. So it's not, a lot of these are public institutions, but we're not seeing full accountability there, which is pretty remarkable. So here's kind of my crazy solutions and thoughts on this. And so I think we need fewer content experts. If you think about the best thinkers in the world, let's just use economics as a topic, because I'm familiar with that. So economics, you could say University of Penn, Wharton. You could look at the Chicago University of Chicago economic system, and maybe Harvard. You could probably have some level of consensus that these 10 universities have the best program, the best content, the best innovation, right? So you have that. So these are the best thought leaders around. Now, hopefully you get some balance, right? You have those in the economic system that tend to be more of a Marxist, those that are to be more of an Adam Smith, free market, Milton Friedman, all of these, John Keynes, right? John Maynard Keynes. You have all of these different experts in their field, and teachers that are basically sharing economic principles. Well, why can't our kids learn from these experts remotely? Why can't they go to a classroom and have the best topic, or the best professor in the world give a talk on Adam Smith over 3 hours, and about, because he's an expert there. Why do we need so many content experts? I think that because of technology, because of how we can absorb information, we should actually be changing this. And content experts actually should be the highest paid teachers, because they can actually reach masses. And what we need, technology can actually connect us to the best thinkers. What we need, and I see this with our kids, we need more teachers' aides. We need more counselors. We need more coaches. We need more therapists. We need people that are there to nurture our youth and help them grow. And that's one of the things that, you start looking at what people are going to college for, and a big part of that is growing up. A big part of it is learning. So we're paying a premium for the content, and the content's easy to get. We need to pay more for the soft skills, the things that are going to help our youth succeed. And it comes down to more of the counseling and the coaching and therapists. People can help our youth think. The content's there. And so we got to flip that over. And you know what? We got to be able to fire low performing teachers. We have, kids that are coming home and, constantly hearing, oh, these 3 teachers are amazing, these 3 teachers are terrible. And, and the one thing about that is every kid learns a little bit differently. So the beauty of having content experts, somebody might be an amazing, learn, from an auditory perspective. So they need a great lecturer. Some people learn through just reading. Some people learn through visual, through charts. So you have different ways to actually absorb content. And so, and I think honestly, I think it's maybe my 4th bullet point down here by the red dot, best teachers and content providers, they would be able to make a lot more money because they would be the thought leaders that would be shaping our youth. And that's not happening at the scale that it should. And then again, Wally, this came back to your original question. Universities should share in the responsibility of student loan balances beyond a certain number of years. All right, I got a question here. So post-COVID, will we need more therapists? Great question, Patty. Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the big byproducts that we're seeing out of this is there's clearly economic damage that's going on. But I think when we look back 2, 3, 4, 5 years, the mental health, the level of stress, anxiety around this is going to far outweigh the financial, the short-term impact that a lot of businesses are feeling right now. And I don't know if we're prepared as a nation to deal with that because that's going to be a bigger issue. I tend to be a much more of an optimistic, positive person, so I don't feel that level of anxiety. But, in the middle of that, there was a few days or weeks where it was tough. I mean, it was, we were feeling the emotion from clients and fielding a lot of calls and there to help. And it wears on you. And I come from a very positive, can-do attitude. And I know we have just a lot of individuals, and I have a couple of kids that, they struggle with that. And they were depressed with what was happening and not able to see friends, and they were isolated and all of that. And you start looking at multiplying that by, 350 plus million Americans and the amount of emotional damage that is going on. So I truly believe that this is the big change that we need to make, and nobody's talking about it, and I don't know why. And maybe they are, and I'm just not reading the right stuff. I do live in the economic world. I do live in the finance world. I live in the investment world. So maybe I'm missing some of this stuff. But if people are writing about it, it's not making its way down. And if I'm wrong, I'd love to send me links, share with me, because I would love to be better versed in that if I'm not understanding it correctly. So I think I watched a recent video on PragerU, and it was Booker T. Washington, and this goes back to kind of the post-Emancipation Proclamation, and it talked about this idea of a practical education and how important practical education is. And this is one of the things we're not getting. You think about, I feel like my kids are learning the same way that I learned. That's 30 years old, and we either went to the library or had Encyclopedia Britannicas, and that was it. And I think our education needs to really change. And I don't know if these percentages are right. I kind of just put something out there, but 50% on academic studies, like basic studies, reading, writing, arithmetic, right? That should be where, that's the traditional education that our kids are getting. The other 50% needs to be on things to get our youth prepared for life. Basic life skills like nutrition, exercise, sleep, basic finances, understanding debt, investing, mental health awareness, community service, doing good by your community, having a sense of this. There's almost zero of this. And I would even argue there's negative this, meaning our kids have bad nutrition habits and bad sleep habits and don't understand about finances. I mean, it's almost to the detriment. There's no common voice. Now, the challenge becomes, well, who sets the agenda for this, right? I have an opinion on how I would teach nutrition, exercise, sleep, fitness, finance, debt, all of this. But what if the state of California set the curriculum different that was counter to what I would want to teach my kids? So that's a little bit of the challenge, right? A lot of this gets taught at home. But unfortunately, that's where a lot of kids are getting left behind because they're not getting this taught at home. So I don't know the best way to solve this. And then the other 25% is mastering a basic trade. Our kids should come out of school with some level of trade, something that is needed in society and without going to college. And there's not enough of that that's happening. And so I'd love us to have more of a practical education. Again, we have kids that when they're really interested in something, no matter what it is, they can go get the information just in time. They can go to their phone and they get it. So those kids that want to excel in certain disciplines can go there. We got to have a little bit more focus on some of these base levels. And, as people get into deeper academic studies, that's where college is to refine. But we got to get better, and again, in my opinion, at the junior high and high school level on some of these things that our kids are getting zero. My kids are getting the basic life skills. They're not mastering a basic trade, but they're getting a lot of the basic life skill. And again, I know this is a little bit repeating. We need this is kind of maybe the core of my argument. We need fewer content experts. Technology can connect us to the best thinkers. We need more counselors, coaches, and therapists. This is especially true at high school. All right, any questions? Let's see what I have. Okay. So the best experts bring in lots of money to research universities, which are the most expensive colleges. This is from Wally. For every grant given to a professor, the universities get a big override. The teaching is secondary at R1 universities, but they are the elite colleges. Thus, some of this money could be used to lower the tuition costs or help with loan payback. Absolutely. So, I mean, that's a little bit of the challenge, right? Is how do we, the university system are essentially, for all intents and purposes, charities, right? So you can donate to them, get a tax deduction. But they're hoarding massive amounts of money. Tuition continues to go up, and I get it. A lot of these universities want to maintain the elite status. So, are we okay with that? Do we just allow for a group of elite universities, and then do we have to change the rest of it, or do we have a mindset of how do we switch it? So it's a great point. I don't really have a good answer to that, but it's, the one thing is, as I look through, and it's kind of my expression of if I were president in 2020 or president for a day, the biggest part I think that we all see is, I think we all as Americans live somewhere in the middle. Our political parties get us way out here, and there's corruption, too much corruption on both sides, and it's so ingrained that it's hard to make a true fix, because there's so many interests, special interests, generational interests that are blocking a lot of reform. And, hopefully coming out of something like this, we can actually start pushing back. I'm digressing a little bit, and I'll just make sure I'm good on time. When the whole issue with the universities coming out, where they were allowing basically wealthy people to lie on their application and, make up basically the tuition scandals that we saw, how did those universities not get slapped and maybe have their 501c3 status challenged or done away with? Right? If a private charity went through that, a local charity, they would have said, "Oh, sorry, you lost your tax exempt status." Universities did not, and that's pervasive through the system. We saw coming out of the debt bubble, the financial crisis in 2008, nobody went to jail, or very few. Companies just had their hands slapped. There wasn't any real ramifications for all this bad behavior, and it's happening on both sides. Those that are very pro-business also allow business to get a lot. Those that are very pro entitlement programs and pro welfare programs are letting government get too big and take control of things. And it's frustrating, because I think we need to find a way back to the middle. And unfortunately, looking at where we are today, that's not changing this year. But I'm hopeful that, we can start making some progress there. I'm so sorry, I totally digress. But another question from Tracy: don't you think that the most important thing we can teach our kids is how to think? Absolutely. The how to think piece is critically important. And the question becomes, where does that start, right? Is that elementary? One of the things that I feel like, so yes, but we also have kids that are coming out of high school without any real skills. Yes, they can think, but they don't have any tangible skills that can get them to work right away. So it needs to be a combination. That's why in a practical education, you have half of the time spent on how to think, how to get better. But then the other half is, how to have basic life skills, how to learn a trade. So we need a combination of it all. And, but that's, you're absolutely right. We do need to, teach people how to think. All right. So this last one is going to be the shortest for today. Our topic is on tax fairness. I could do a whole hour on this. I have too many opinions that probably would upset a lot of people, and I think from both sides of the aisle. So I just want to I'm going to go super high level on this as we're wrapping up. So we do have probably another 5 minutes or so, maybe 10. We'll see how this goes. So we're going to talk about tax fairness. Now, fairness is a dangerous word, because fair to who? And how do you determine this idea of fairness? So here's the question that I still can't answer. Now, with all, I'll get into this in a second. I'll digress just for a moment. I do a lot of continuing education for a couple CPA firms around the area. And, I'll get into this, and we'll have some kind of heated debates on the tax policy and all these issues. So I know my opinion is not shared by all or even shared by most. It's just my opinion on where I think we should be looking at. So at the core, because of the entrenched interests on both sides of the aisle, and again, both sides are going to point fingers, so I'm not here to do that, but our government is growing too big. And so at the core of what I believe, the spending is the biggest problem. The tax strategy can be tweaked and made more fair, but spending is what's been out of control. If you look at our tax policy going back 100 years, our revenues have been pretty consistent. What has changed in the last 20 years is our spending has gone through the roof, and nobody is checking it. The Republicans who claim to want to be more balanced, they haven't done that the last 20 years under Bush or under Trump. And I know there's circumstances, so I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just talking about reality. And so, the thing is we have to deal with spending, but no politician wants to deal with it, because if you go to the public, the average voter, and you say you're going to cut back on programs or cut back on whatever, you're going to lose. So how do we move forward? Now, the easiest way to maybe fix the spending is at least just freeze it. Just say, all right, we can't undo what we did. We can't undo the harm we did, but we just have to freeze it, lock it. We cannot let it go up, except for what we would deem as essential services. And everybody has a different answer for that. So I'm not going to digress. But here's the big question that I have. So I believe, as a society, let me read this. As a society, do we value capital, meaning investment, over work? I think the answer is no. We as a nation value work. We value hard work. So if the answer is no, then why does the tax code favor capital gains? So if you go to work and you make $100,000, you are going to pay far more income taxes, payroll taxes, than the person who is just collecting $100,000 from an investment. So that just totally perplexed me. Now, I'm not saying one is better than the other, but right now our system is, if you go out and work, and you literally, if you work, kind of work is measured wages by the sweat of your brow, you going out there and being productive, you're being taxed at a substantially higher rate than if you are using capital, which is, we're a capitalist nation. I don't have a problem with capital. That's what you've hired us to do. We're managing your capital. We're helping you make good decisions with your capital. So I have nothing against that, but that's taxed at such a substantially lower rate. And let me give you a quick example of that. So at roughly 100,000 on capital, meaning capital gains, it's about 15%. If you think about on wages at that 100,000, you're going to be at roughly 22% federal tax plus your payroll tax of another 6%. So you're almost at 28% versus 15%. I honestly think we got to get to a system where all income, regardless of source, should be taxed the same way. That would also simplify stuff for the IRS. We don't care if it comes from real estate income, dividend income, bank interest, right? From working, from being a sole proprietor, from whatever, tax it the same. Where the taxes need to adjust is how much you make. So this gets a little bit tricky when you start getting into flat taxes, but that's at the core of what I believe is tax all income regardless of source the same way. Why are we incentivizing investment over work? I think that's going to run into a lot of the strife and a lot of the issues we're seeing now, is it doesn't seem fair. And Warren Buffett has made pure comment on this. Now, I don't always I don't agree with a lot of what he says, but one of his things that he did talk about, he's like, my secretary is paying tax at a higher rate than I do. And technically he's right. Now he pays far more in tax, so it's a little bit misleading, but she does pay at a higher rate. And that's what this issue is around fairness. So how do we make, assuming we can all agree with me and we'll stop the spending or the out of control spending, lock that in, and let's start really addressing tax fairness. Now, a flat tax means tax everyone the same. And it's kind of interesting when you start talking to young people, kids, and you say, well, what do you think if, half of the people pay all the taxes and half pay no? Do you think that, or pay none? Do you think that's fair for income taxes? And the short answer is no. And it's kind of a flat tax idea is that everybody should pay some, and it should be if you pay a percentage, if you make more, you pay a higher dollar amount. If you make less, you pay a lower dollar amount. So this is just kind of my simple idea is all citizens should pay zero tax on the first 10,000 of income. It's kind of like our standard deduction. Right now, that number is at 12,000. but I think it should be 10,000 of income per citizen. So if you're a family of 4, you get 40,000. If you're a family of 6, you get 60,000. So that might, all citizens should pay 0 tax on the first 10,000 of income, eliminate all other payroll and other taxes. Up to $1 million, pay it at 20%, and above $1 million, pay it 35%. Eliminate most of the deductions that we're all getting, except for charitable giving. So we see a lot. Our tax code is manipulating how we make decisions, and I think we have to start just making it fair. Why do I get a better break because I own a house and I can deduct my property taxes and my mortgage interest? Where if somebody rents a house, they don't get a deduction. They have to pay their full rent. So there's a bit of unfairness in there. Now, people are making decisions based on how the tax code is built. So you can't just rip the Band-Aid off and take away all of this. It's definitely a slow process. And the hard part is, this is probably the one area that I don't think we're going to see change in, because we need someone to set up like a 50-year business plan for our country. That's what I would want to do, right? If you're running your family, right? You're the patriarch or matriarch of your family, and you're like, I want to set a 50-year plan for my family. How am I going to teach my grandchildren and great-grandchildren about the value of money, about the value of work ethic? What do I want to instill in them? You could create a plan for your family and how you wanted to leave a legacy. Our country needs that, but our political system is, every 2 years, every 4 years, or every 6 years. And so we're not getting any meaningful change where somebody's looking down the road and trying to make real reform that's lasting versus temporary changes to kind of appeal to the masses or appeal to their voting base. And so this right here with the flat tax, you got to get in and look at the numbers. I don't know if this solves everything. You may have to move them up or down a little bit, but the whole idea is I do think we need to move towards taxing all sources of income at the same rate. And this is an area that, more conservative voters don't agree with me on this. They're big proponents of taxing capital in a more advantageous way. And I just think we got to get back to some fairness and not preference too much of how we're taxing things. All right. So hold on real quick. Let me, I think I just had one slide for that. I did. Okay. So I'll just do some questions. I got a couple questions in here. So Wally, does lower capital gain tax encourage someone to create a company that hires people to work? So I don't think lower capital gain taxes encourages that, because, when you start a company, you don't really benefit from lower capital gains tax until you sell a company, right? So if I started a company with nothing in my pocket and I grew it from a $0 company to a $50 million company, when I sell it 30, 40, 50 years and I created wealth, I created jobs, I will get relief when I sell it at a lower capital gains rate, but you're not getting relief ongoing from a capital gains perspective to create a company that hires people. So that doesn't really, that would not apply there. But that's a great question. And it is complicated. So I'm not pretending that there should be, that there's an easy answer to this, but I just think we gotta start looking at a lot of the complex tax code. I mean, we just made some tax changes, and added, I don't know if there's like another 700-page tax bill. I mean, it gets to be insanity. Our politicians don't know what's in it, and they just keep passing things that are written by lobbyists. And I know that's a bad word, but different industries have to write the policy because they understand it better than any politician. So I get it. That's the way a lot of our tax policy is written, because it's written by people to favor their industries. But I think we got to start stripping that out and make it a lot more simple, more easier to understand, easier to digest. And I think that will add some fairness to it. So I think we're out of questions. I hope you enjoyed the content today. I know I got a little bit more controversial. I don't pretend like I have all the answers. This was definitely a fun exercise to go through, just getting research and kind of trying to shape my opinions. I really set this year out in 2020 to kind of this idea of achieving more. It's one of the things that we stand by here as a firm, Achieve More. I set up a charity for that called, just Achieve More 2020. And it's this idea of just making this decade great. And I think that we got to start looking at down the road, and hopefully we'll get politicians to start that process. But I think as individuals, the one thing that, while I have all these ideas that are maybe on a more grand scale, the things that I know I have control of myself and my personal habits. I have control of things that I can do to better my family, better my company and my employees, my clients that I work with, and my community. And if I can focus there and start there, hopefully that means that we'll be better as a society. And hopefully, you know, we'll start getting some politicians with some real guts and start making some change. And I might have had another question sneak in here. So someone just said they enjoyed this. Well, thank you, Tracy. We're going to do our next webinar in a month. So we're going to get on a monthly track. You know, if we find some really great content, or if you have ideas, please share with us. You know, I love prepping for these. This has been, while I'm not seeing you, seeing my clients through this, I feel very connected by having a weekly update, just being able to check in and share some of our thoughts. And I love a little bit of the banter. Hopefully in the fall, or maybe even next year, we'll be able to do this in person. So thank you very much. And you all have a great evening.